You're here.
Good evening. I'm Mary Hardy, a native. I always say that I'm a native of McGee, Mississippi, but reside in Greenville, Mississippi. So today I will share a bit about the impact of the Harlem Renaissance on today's culture. I'll do that, and I'll share a few pieces from the Harlem writers, emphasizing we are who we are because they were who they were. The impact of the Harlem Renaissance on today's culture is one of those topics that I was not there, but I can feel it. You know, it's just like I was there. I can feel it. The Harlem Renaissance flourished during the 1920s and 1930s. It was originally referred to as the Negro movement. When we were colored and we were not satisfied with it, we knew that we needed to do something and make use of that time. This was the first time African Americans were able to express as a group their determination through the arts. They were able to display their natural, diverse talents to create their own experiences, their own experience. And it was through music, dance, speaking, writing, and other forms. They were prideful of their natural talents. It was a time of heated racial tension, and opportunities were scarce. So they had to make their own entertainment. Like growing up as children, we didn't have all that they have today. We didn't have all of the technology and the other entertainments. We had to make our own, and they did. The Negroes and Blacks were ending awful treatment under Jim Crow laws, and as did their ancestors. So troubled minds created the best art. What was displayed during this time of the Harlem Renaissance influenced the culture of art, literature, and philosophy forever. The Harlem Renaissance gave African Americans, or Blacks at that time, we were called Negroes, a voice to share all the things they wish they could say while enslaved. Even hearing the stories of their ancestors and the many ideas and thoughts they had traveling through their minds, and they were many. The Harlem Renaissance was a movement to share it all, as I've said, through dance, through written words, music. It was an authentic, prideful, loud voice. It was the Harlem Renaissance, the 1920s and the 1930s. And I've often heard the roaring 20s, the roaring 30s. And it was happening in Harlem, New York. The Negro movement with freedom of expression. And if you've read anything about the Harlem Renaissance and what was going on during that time, you can feel it. It was a moving time. I wasn't there, but I can see it. And again, I'll say the Harlem Renaissance was the development of the Harlem neighborhood in New York City as a Black cultural mecca. And that was during the 20th century. And the subsequent and social artistic explosion that resulted. And I often say that I spent a little time in New York City and Staten Island and had an opportunity to visit Harlem, New York. And as I was telling my daughter earlier, and living in that time, visiting New York and visiting Harlem, New York, we had as a family a 1969 Plymouth Duster. And we drove up to Harlem, New York. Was parked on a corner, deciding which way we needed to turn, right or left. And I believe we were turning right. And there was a group of guys standing on the corner, and they looked over in that car, which was that 1969 Plymouth Duster. I had two daughters at the time, Adrian and Miranda. Those guys looked over in that car and they said, "We don't want it." And we moved on. But I'm thinking that Duster was, it was an automatic. If it had been a stick, they probably would have said, "You all need to get out of this car and we want it, but it wasn't. It wasn't the right car. But that was Harlem, New York at that time. And just being in that area at that time, I could feel the movement of the Harlem Renaissance. So it moves on. The Harlem Renaissance was definitely a golden age of African-American culture manifesting in the literature, in the music, stage performances, and the art. So then, we are who we are because they were who they were at the time. And of course, before the Harlem Renaissance, it was the great migration happened, and that's when the northern Manhattan neighborhood of Harlem, that's when it meant the most to the upper class white neighborhood. It was considered an upper class white neighborhood during the 1880s. And that rapid movement led to, they kind of moved out. So that led to the empty buildings, and the landlords, the desperate landlords were seeking to fill them. So in that early 1920s, 1900s and the 1920s, a few middle-class Black families moved in. And I would say that's when it all started. That at that time, it was known as it was like the pre-Harlem Renaissance time, when there were a group of people moved to New York called the Black Bohemians moved to Harlem. And then the Black families followed. And some of the white families fought to keep the African Americans out, but it failed. The white folks fled, and then the Blacks came in. So those outside factors led to the population explosion, or the boom of the African Americans migrating from the South to the North, with prominent figures like W.E.B. Du Bois leading the way. So in the 1915 and the 1960s, 16 natural disasters in the South put Black workers and sharecroppers out of work. And of course, that was after World War I, and the migration to us led us to New York City, and you know, it was kind of the phasing in of the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was the turning point in history of Black Americans. It helped African Americans, writers and artists, and in the representation of the Black culture and experience. It also provided the African Americans an opportunity to show themselves in a new light. The Harlem Renaissance had an enormous impact on Black consciousness worldwide. People appreciated the variety of African Americans' lives and culture. The Harlem Renaissance radically shaped the African Americans' new image in the whole world. They were no longer considered as dirty, blunt, or uneducated people. Instead, they were now sophisticated, well-educated, talented members of society. So it helped bring the light and the confidence and prominence to African Americans. Of course, they were not referred to African Americans at the time. They were referred to as colored and Negroes and Black. The Harlem Renaissance deeply impacted the dynamics of African Americans' identity through the arts and the culture. In the United States, it helped them to improve their living standards and escape the worst abuse of the racial caste system. After its boom and Black Pride celebration, the Harlem Renaissance ended, and its writers and artists dispersed, and the fire of the movement dimmed. The decline of the Harlem Renaissance was due to the stock market, which crashed in 1929, and the resulting Great Depression. This economic instability forced people to seek their interests elsewhere rather than relinquish in the revitalization of Harlem. That was the Harlem riots of 1935, terminating events of the cultural flowering. The riots began with the rumors of beating and killing teenage shoplifters. This event ended the idea of optimism in the Black community. A lot of what we see happening today. We are who we are because they were who they were. And that continues today. As I was as a result of the riots, the Northern recruiters headed south to entice Black workers to their companies. So that started we've heard about the Great Migration to Chicago and elsewhere. And it's because companies from those northern areas came to the South to recruit Blacks to come north. So, because all of this kind of, I know I'll keep going back and forth, but all of it kind of ties in to who we are. So in the 1920s, some 300,000 African Americans from the South moved north. And of course, the Harlem Renaissance at that time was one of the most important destinations for those families. So I know, you know, it's kind of I'll move kind of back and forth with this, but it all ties in as to who we are today and what we do as writers. We're still writing. We're still dancing. We're still exhibiting musical talent because of their influence. You know, history repeats itself. It kind of goes back and forth. I'll share this. One of my students said to me this week, he says, you know, ladies or women are like history. They keep going back and forth. So we keep going back and forth with what we do. So, and as I said, I'll share a little piece, some pieces from some of the folks back then. And I'll get to that a little later. Some of those people that were busy in that movement, like W.E.B. Du Bois, Claude McKay, Zora Neale Hurston, Countee Cullen. The Harlem Renaissance had a huge influence then and now, and it continues to give rise to what we do today. As I said, we continue to read, listen to others. We continue to sing, dance, write about the experiences then, write about our experiences now. It just all ties in to what we do today. But it just seemed like back then they were more out with it. It was much of a boom. They were all doing it. So, but with us, we're doing it, but it just doesn't seem like we have that energy, that enthusiastic that they had back then. You know, that was just their way of expressing it all. We kind of express it in different ways now, but it all ties in to it was a movement that, you know, won't go away. It will exist forever. We just don't want we want our children and our grandchildren to be aware of that movement. We want them to continue to read about it. I had an experience about 3 weeks ago. We were preparing for an event for Sunday that I missed. And I worked with a group of boys, Esquire boys, and they had to do a performance for this occasion. So I said, why don't we do the Harlem Renaissance and have the Harlem voices? So we assigned these young men different pieces from different representations of persons who wrote and danced during that time. I was not there to hear it and see it, but I understand it was a hit. So we are who we are because they were who they were. So I want to remind you that the occurrences during the Harlem Renaissance, known as the Negro movement, shape what we do today and how we do it. And this phrase, who we are who we are, because they were who they were. I happen to be walking, I'm part-time teaching, so I happened to be walking down the corridor one day, and one of the teachers had this on her door. And I said, my goodness, this is what I'm doing. So that's how I got that phrase. We are who we are because they were who they were. And I thought that was just so profound that was on her door. So, and as I'll say again, that the Harlem Renaissance was a turning point in Black cultural history. It helped African-American writers and artists gained control over the representation of Black culture and experience. It provided them and us a place in Western high culture. The Harlem Renaissance laid the groundwork for all later African-American literature, and it had an enormous impact on Black consciousness worldwide.
I have really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to share a little bit about the some of those Harlem Renaissance writers during that time, like Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes is one of the most important figures of the Harlem Renaissance. And I want to share a little bit about, share a little of one of his pieces that he wrote. And it's the Weary Blues. And it reads, drowning a drowsy, syncopated tune, rocking back and forth to a mellow croon. I heard a Negro play down the Lenox Avenue the other night by the pale, dull parlor of an old gas light. He did a lazy sway. He did a lazy sway to the tune of those weary blues with his ebony hands on each ivory key. He made that poor piano moan with melody, old blues, swaying to and fro on his rickety stool. He played that sad, saggy tune like a musical fool, sweet blues, coming from a Black man's soul, old blues, and a deep song voice with a melancholy tone. I heard that Negro sing that old piano moan. Ain't got nobody but myself. It's gonna quit my frowning and put my troubles on the shelf. And so that was the Weary Blues, written by Langston Hughes. And I have a few others I want to share. And there was Claude McKay. He was considered the first major poet of the Harlem Renaissance. His militant poem, If We Must Die, 1919, is one of the most quoted works of African-American literature of this time. But I'll read a little bit about, well, I have If We Must Die. I was thinking I didn't have it, but I'll share a little bit about a little piece from If We Must Die by Claude McKay. I'm not really a Facebook person, but someone had a little bit about him on Facebook last week. So with Claude McKay, he says, in this one of his pieces, the piece We Must Die, he said, if we must die, let it not be like hogs, haunted and pinned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mark at our accused lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, if so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us through though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave. And for the 1,000 blows, deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave, like men we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed on the wall, dying, but fighting back. And that's Claude McKay. And there were ladies like Zora Neale Hurston. The Harlem Renaissance continued, like I said, through the 1930s with Zora Neale Hurston's novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, and I'm sure most of you has read it. It's widely regarded as one of the signal achievements of the Harlem Renaissance. And there were other writers like Arna Bontemps, who also produced great works. And of course, W.E.B. Du Bois, who was one of the earliest African-American rights activists. He was the first African-American to earn a PhD from Harvard University. He was a renowned historian, sociologist, activist, editor, essayist, novelist, and poet. He could just do it all. He became the spokesperson for African-American rights during the 20th century. He played a central role in the Harlem Renaissance, initially as an inspiration and patron, while later as an increasingly capitalist critic. He's responsible for the magazine, the Crisis magazine, that's still in existence by the NAACP. So he was that guy that kept them on their toes, that kept them conscious, aware of who they are, who they were at the time. He's responsible for the souls of Black folks. So he was, like I say, one of those guys that kept them on their toes, kept them aware of who they are, who they were. And there were other people. A little bit more about W.E.B. As I've said, his birthday. Today is February the 23rd. Today's W.E.B. Du Bois' birthday. He departed August the 27th, 1963 in Accra, Ghana. Like I said, he was responsible for the founding of the NAACP Niagara movement. And some of his quotes from W.E. Du Bois, he said, there is but one coward on earth, and that is the coward that dare not know. So we need to be in the know. I always say in attending conferences, if you don't go, you don't know. So it's, someone will come back and tell you something, but they might twist it up and you don't get the realness. So if you want to be in the know, you need to go, you need to read, and you need to do some research and be yourself. That's W.E.B. Du Bois. And then of course, there are other people like Sterling Brown, someone that he's one of those people you don't hear too much about, but he was very active and a real writer. I'll share a little piece. Let me share a little bit from Sterling Brown. I'm not sure about, the title of this piece is Slim Greer in Hell. And it reads, Slim Greer went to heaven. St. Peter said, Slim, You've been a right good boy. And he winked at him. You've been a traveling rascal in your day. You can moan once more. Did you come to stay? Put these wings on your shoulders and save your feet. Slim grinned, and he speak up. Thank you, Pete. Then Pete said, go to hell and see, and that is doing, and report to me. And that's Slim Greer in heaven. So they were writers, real writers, and I'm sure they were soul searching themselves and writing about things happening around them. Count A. Cullen was another one of those guys that was writing during that time. And that I have a short piece I can share from Count A. Cullen. He said, and it's a title entitled "A Brown Girl Dead with 2 white roses on her breast, white candles at head and feet. Dark Madonna of the grave she rests. Lord Death has found her sweet. Her mother pawned her wedding ring to lay her out in white. She's so proud, she danced and sing to see herself tonight. And of course, there are other people like James Weldon Johnson, Jean Toomer, and James Weldon Johnson's creation that we all learn and we can all say, which is, and I'll share 2 little verses. Yes.
You just mentioned James Weldon Johnson, and that is a prime example of the impact of the Harlem Renaissance. It's since 2020 in particular, I have heard Lift Every Voice sung at events more than I have since I was in my 20s or in recent times. That song has endured as our national anthem for generations. And for the first time, it was sung at the Super Bowl. So
right.
To me, that was a full circle example of how the Harlem Renaissance has placed itself in popular culture. And
That's
then, of
right.
course, they protested it being sung, but
right.
It was sung very beautiful.
Right. We are who we are because of who they were. And they set the tone. They set it. And there's no way we can erase it. We just need to reiterate it and talk about it and encourage our young to keep it moving. Thank you.
Mary, I have this book, The Harlem Renaissance Reader, and I wanted to just, it has a lot of the names that you named, some that you didn't name. I wanted to add Ann Spencer, Jean Toomer, T.S. Strickland, Jesse Redmond Fawcett, Walter White, Gwendolyn Bennett, Richard Bruce Nugent, Dorothy West. I have one of her books. Nella Larson. You did mention Claude McKay. Then there's a story here by Richard Wright. It's called Blueprint for Negro Writing, which I'd like to read that. Paul Robeson, Rudolph.
Yeah, Paul Robeson was one of those guys that that the United States ostracized, and he was ostracized, but now he's being recognized. So
yes. And Langston Hughes is one of the things that I learned about him historically is that he sold most of his poetry and works was purchased by us. He made his some of the Harlem Renaissance writers were commercially selling, crossing over, selling to whites as well as black. But most of Langston Hughes' works was purchased by us. So he I think he lived in Harlem, and he had a nice brownstone there, and he did very well commercially.
Right. There's a brownstone that's named in his honor.
Oh, it is.
Harlem, in
Okay.
Harlem, New York. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I learned a lot as I was doing this research. So, you know, Duke Ellington, James Vanderzee, Jesse Foss, all of these guys and ladies were moving and shaking during this time, which had a great influence on what we do today, who we are, because they were who they were. So I don't know where I am with time, but I'll say again.
We have 20 minutes left.
Okay, so I'll say again that the Harlem Renaissance was an African-American cultural movement or Negro movement that flourished in the 1920s and the 1930s in Harlem, New York City as its symbolic capital. It was a time of great creativity in musical, theatrical, and visual arts. What was perhaps was most associated with literature and the flowering of the New York movement as it participated and celebrated African-American history and rejoicing the era. The effects of the movement laid the groundwork for later African-American literature and had a huge impact on the subsequent Black literature and consciousness worldwide.
Yeah, and so some of those poems and writings from the Harlem Renaissance, they called it protest writing. And and I was just looking at Langston Hughes' I Too, and I want to just read one of the verses. Said, I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh. In other words, he was protesting about segregation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Harlem Renaissance also broke down some of the stereotypes. Like, for instance, jazz was a big part of the Harlem Renaissance as well. And Louis Armstrong, he still used like the bulging eyes when he was a performer, but he was much older than some of the other people in jazz that would come later, like Miles Davis or Billie Holiday or some of them. But he influenced all of them because he's the father of jazz. But I think that you're right that they broke down a lot of the negative stereotypes that had lingered from slavery and was still lingering in their time. And I guess in a sense we're still breaking down stereotypes.
Well, they wrote about those things that were happening to them at that time and things that they would like to see changed. But you know, they've kind of repeated itself. We're still writing about things that are happening to us and things that we'd like to see changed, and we are still talking about those things and speaking and dancing about those things. So yes, had a huge impact on what we do and how we do it today.
Yes, yeah. So, I think what time are you gonna start your question and answer?
It's time. We can begin our questioning. If there are those out there that have questions that I can answer, or if I can't answer them, Meredith can help me answer, or maybe someone on can help answer them. I just learned a lot as I was doing this research. So I want to thank Meredith for inviting me to share the tiny information that I have. The Mississippi Humanities Department and Community Library of Mississippi. So if there are questions, feel free to ask.
What I wanted to ask you, what are some of the key things that you learned when you did your research about the Harlem Renaissance and the impact that it has on today's society?
Well, from my research, it took me back to when it actually occurred between the 1920s and the 1930s. And then it kind of ushered in
There, okay. We lost, I think she's coming back now.
I'm trying.
Okay. Okay, so what were some of the things we could hear you though that you?
Okay, here I am.
Okay.
It kind of ushered. My face is gone. My voice is. They can hear me, but they can't see me. That we, as today, we still do, and I'm not sure whether I'm answering this question right, but the way it should be. But from what they did then, based on what they did, we are in some aspects repeating and writing about what's happening now, what's happening to us, and sort of what they did back then. It was a time of unrest and situations happening that they knew should not be happening. So they wrote about them and spoke about them in their writing.
Yeah. And we're very, very creative. I heard you say that out of the struggle, they created so many things because they created jazz. They created, they wrote about the Black experience, and they did plays about the Black. They raised the consciousness of the Black experience in all of the areas: sports, music, theater, writing, poetry, stories, and then even had commercial success that they would not have prior to the Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
Which I think was one of the most significant parts of it. And
right.
Then,
they opened doors to publishing houses of Black authors. That was not before that time. So they were just instrumental in opening our eyes and minds to what should be happening that we had not been exposed to.
And then when you said that when you were in Harlem, you could see it. One of the things that I could imagine in my mind is Marcus Garvey and hundreds of people marching through the streets in uniform, saying to us, let's rise, let's build business, economic development, support for one another. I mean, he was like really a trendsetter in that whole movement of Marcus Garvey. And I could just see them marching and the impact and inspiration that people get from them standing
Right.
up for us.
Right. Marcus Garvey was on it. I had that experience last week when I was issuing the pieces to the young men to participate in the program. So we had a young man that was there that's very quiet. So I was giving out the pieces, and I'd given him Langston Hughes or someone. His mother says, no, I want him to have Marcus Garvey. He's too soft with what he does. I think he's a ninth grader. She said, he needs to speak up. So let me have him. He needs Marcus Garvey. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So any other questions?
Any
It's
other
amazing.
questions? I'll go ahead.
I said, it's amazing of how what this technology can do. I'm sitting at a park right on the Alabama line with my iPad getting this done. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do it, but I'm doing it. So it's happening.
Yeah, you got some Wi-Fi, huh?
I have built-in data thanks to my children, my girls. I have an iPad that has built-in data, so I can, no matter where I am, I can present.
Okay. What was there any other questions or comments?
Any questions from the audience?
Okay, Mary, can I read two more of the the poem from Langston Hughes?
Of course, of course.
And eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll sit at the table when company comes. Nobody dare say to me, eat in the kitchen. Then, besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am American. So that right there was direct protest. He at the beginning of the poem, I too, he talks about being sent from the kitchen. Of course, 90% of Black women were maids. And if their children were with them, they couldn't sit at the table or eat. They would have to stand there, and we were just so humiliated. And he's saying that now America should be ashamed of how they treat me, and they should accept me and not ask me to tell me to leave. And I mean, that was just powerful in terms of the consciousness of this type of writing. And you saw it in all of the people that you named. And it was something that we had not done before. This type of direct messaging in our writing before the Harlem Renaissance. I thought that those were some of the powerful things that that still exist now, and as you said, from their influence.
Right. Yeah. And the fact that they're trying to keep that from us from sharing those stories today or those poems today, that we'll have to push through.
Wow, with the book bans,
yes,
especially in the South, we can't teach race. Even in Mississippi, they trying to pass the Patriot Education Act, which waters down history. But it's so interesting because those are tax dollars.
That's right. But we'll push through it. We'll have a way. We'll get it done. We'll talk about it in a way that, we'll get it done. So we'll push through that.
And you mentioned this, I don't know which writer you said, but you said that they said, I think you said it was Du Bois, that to know we must read and self-study. And I think that if the book is banned, read it anyway. I think that that's the way to approach it.
That's right. We'll get it done.
Right. So we have about 10 minutes left. I want to thank you, Mary, for your presentation. I want to thank everybody for coming. And all thing I want to do is ask people if they would fill out the evaluation. And it's in the chat for the Mississippi Humanities Council, or I could email it to you. And you have any other final points that you want to discuss in the last 10 minutes, Mary?
Excuse me.
Okay, go ahead, Lynette.
Hey, how you all doing?
All right, how are you, Lynette?
All right, I was listening, but I was driving, so I had to drive safe. But I parked now, so I really enjoyed this. It was, and thank y'all for putting it on. It was really nice and informative. Made me want to do a little bit more reading.
Oh, really? Me too.
And I'm doing a project, and half of I'm going to use a picture of my thing is going to be with Zora Neale Hurston and August Wilson. So I said, well, this right on.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, because I was just browsing through this book, which I've read some of it years ago. But anyway, I would like to read what Richard Wright said about how you write about the tips he has for Negro writers. I'd like to see what he had to say on that. Now,
okay,
Janice said that she doesn't have any sound on her computer, but she's glad that she was able to attend.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you. She doesn't have any sound. Thank you for attending. Thanks all of you for taking the time out to listen. Okay, Meredith.
Okay, so I just pasted the evaluation in the a chat again for people to fill out, and we're at the last 5 minutes. You want to make a final statement or read one of the
No, I just like to say that I want to thank you all for listening and continue to do some research on the Harlem Renaissance. Share the information with your children, your grandchildren. Let them know what took place in the 1920s and 1930s, why it was happening, where it happened, and the results that the impact it has on us today. Encourage them to write, put pen to paper, and write about, their experiences. They have some, so, never know what they've written today could come to bigger things later. So just encourage, tell children that we are who we are because they were who they were. I think that's a profound statement that I just bumped into on a teacher's classroom door. So thank you again, Meredith, for inviting me to become aware of some things that I had probably pushed way back. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And did you say you wanted to share a piece?
I was looking for the one that Richard Wright, let me see. This is one, hold on. Okay, now this is Romare Verdon. I'm just gonna read a paragraph from this. It says, because this is what a Harlem Renaissance writer was thinking in terms of this Black movement or Negro movement that they started. The Negro artists and modern art. For the movement, let us look back into the beginning of modern art. It is really nothing new, merely an expression projected through new forms. more akin to the spirit of the times. Fundamentally, the artist is influenced by the age in which he lives. Then, for the artist to express an age that is characterized by machinery, skyscrapers, radios, and the generally quickened cadences of modern life, it follows naturally that he will break from many of the out-modeled academic practices of the past. In fact, every great movement that has changed the ideals and customs of life has occasioned a change in the accepted expression of that age. So she, well, this writer really sums it up because they're saying none of this is new. All of these expressions are that they were doing was what needed to be done in the present time, and really the present time in the 20s and 30s, they had their own set of issues and challenges and things to protest. Just like in 2023, we have our own set of challenges to write about and to express in protest in any art form. And that's it in a nutshell. Because if you go to a movie and we look at the Black experience in the movie, that's another art form. Or when we fought to have leftover voice sung at the NFL at the football game because we don't like some of the lines in the national anthem. That's another form of protest and expression, or in poetry and all of that. Well, anyway, I'm glad I got to read that one paragraph because it really said a lot in one paragraph about what those artists were thinking about, what they were doing in terms of their expression. And we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for your research, Mary, and I wish you all a safe travel. And also, I wanted to remind everybody to fill out the evaluation. I can email it to you, or you can copy and paste it. And I want to thank Community Library of Mississippi and the Mississippi Humanities Council for supporting the history speaking series, which Mary was a presenter. And next month, Janice will be a presenter for in Women's History Month. She's doing Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer. And tomorrow, another author, Malaysia Smith, is doing the impact of rap music onto today's youth. If you want to get a ticket to her event, and tomorrow's the same time from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all
Goodbye.
have a blessed day.
Okay,
Thank
you
you.
all do the
Goodbye.
same. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you.